Welcome to the SaaS Backwards podcast, where we reverse engineer the success of fast-growing SaaS firms and explore strategies CMOs and CEOs are using to drive their businesses forward.
Welcome to SaaS Backwards, a podcast that helps SaaS CEOs and CMOs to accelerate growth and enhance profitability. Our guest today is Janet Jaiswal, Global VP of Marketing at BlueShift, an AI-powered customer engagement platform that works across all marketing channels, including email, mobile, websites, display, IVR, addressable TV, and more. Hey, Janet, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to record your episode. But before we dig in deep, please tell our listeners a little about your background at BlueShift.
Sure. I'm a 20-year veteran of B2B SaaS marketing. I've worked at startups through well-established companies such as IBM, eBay, Infosys, PayPal, and a lot of startups that most people won't be familiar with. My specialty within marketing is helping companies to scale and grow. And that actually involves the go-to-market function, if you will. I use my hands-on experience across a variety of marketing sub-functions as well as product sub-functions to figure out what's the right amount of process, technology, people, skill set necessary at each stage in a company. I test what works, and once it's identified, set it up for the company to scale infinitely, if you will. I'm also an advisor at Peakspan Capital in their marketing function. And I also write a lot on LinkedIn and some on Medium about the topic of marketing. So love it. I'm a student of the marketing function. I'm learning as well and sharing my insights where I can.
That's awesome. I think it's great as a marketing leader to have your thought process out there, and good for folks that are still managing their career to leave those breadcrumbs, right? So you're not just operating within your personal experience and the network you build interpersonally, but leaving those breadcrumbs out for people to find you. So for listeners in transition or think they might be, it's a good time to start putting that stuff out there. You all have great thinking. Speaking about transitions, you've been at BlueShift for it looks like about 4 months. And I was wondering if you have any insight into the playbook you ran for your first 100 days. We should be right around there, right? And you had a playbook that you ran from, and what was the situation you found yourself in, and what changes have you made?
So first, just to set some context, let me tell you what BlueShift's about. So BlueShift helps brands engage their customers on a one-to-one basis by making data and the intelligence from AI effortlessly actionable on every channel, kind of like the channels you mentioned. So we provide a customer data platform, AI-based decisioning and recommendations, and a cross-channel marketing hub all in one place. So that way brands have the tools they need to deliver the seamless, personalized experience in real time across that entire customer journey. Because we all know consumers are becoming more and more demanding, and they want to be met on their own terms, right? It's like when I want it in the device with the right information. And that can be challenging for large brands that have tens of millions of customers. So in terms of the first 100 days, so my playbook does vary from company to company and what the starting situation is. But some things that are in common is coming in and just shutting my mouth and listening and observing, right? So in the beginning, I always try to assess what's working, what's not working in terms of talent, in terms of the processes that are there, the technologies that are there. How is the sales team functioning? How are the partnership team functioning, customer success, and marketing? Then I start to create that marketing plan, and eventually I want to get buy-up, but initially it's around getting some short-term wins. Once I get some short-term wins, it's a lot easier to then convince them to sign on for the rest of the strategy, because they're like, oh, you've already made some improvements. They're going to be much more receptive. So it's very much a crawl, walk, run, like fix the short-term stuff, put in the plan for the medium and long-term, which are going to take longer to do. So that's pretty much my playbook that I tend to follow. And again, big caveat, strategies are different if you come into a situation where the company is targeting SMBs versus the other end of the spectrum, enterprises, which is much more of an ABM play versus an online digital marketing play, if you will. So tactics will definitely vary.
Yeah, I mean, we've studied the onboarding of the marketing leader pretty carefully and actually have an offer on our website. If people want to get our 100-day plan template looks a lot like that. Make sure you understand the situation you're in, get those short-term wins. I think there's going to be a lot of transition this year in the marketing leadership ranks. Not with you, of course, but there's a lot of stress in the system,
There is.
between funding on the way in, lack of exits on the way out, valuations being compressed, budgets being compressed. So I just feel like we should be prepared to mount the job hunt and to succeed when we land, maybe even more so than the last few years.
Yeah, definitely recent events will tell you that, yeah, the marketing function's under pressure, as are other functions, but yeah, you want to be prepared.
Moving on, and maybe a deep dive here, but thought leadership and content is always front and center in our thinking. And in the prep session you did with us, talked about the relationship between search engine optimization and content. And I think content marketing is one of those areas that's going to be under a lot of pressure this year and into next, with the rise of the machines creating content of dubious quality, practitioners maybe not doing enough to augment the output of these chat environments with their own original thinking, and changes in the search engines. It's like everything's happening everywhere all at once to make it more difficult. But I wanted to get your take on the relationship between SEO and content, because there will for some time be SEO. And take us through your thinking about, the content platform for a company and brand like Blue Shift, where you're doing a B2B play, it's a large sale. There's a lot of consideration, a lot of players. So what's the role there for our content assets?
Yeah, I think of SEO and content as tightly related. In fact, I've worked with head of content that is experienced on SEO as well as content. So I do think that they need to be interrelated. Certainly you can write content for thought leadership, which you don't want to optimize for SEO. And you can write content for more educational content that you would want to optimize for SEO. But yeah, Google's latest algorithm change, right? SGE, Search Generative Experience. That certainly is throwing a lot of content marketers for a loop, right? I think Google's goal is to provide that, the comprehensive and the concise answer across the web. I mean, they're definitely crawling, but they want to put it all on one page such that visitors get their answers without having to click through. And so, yeah, it's going to cause a lot of the traditional methods to not work as well. So what I can tell you is, I think it's still early days. The consensus from my network is that it's not 100% accurate. It'll get there. We know that it will. It's just a matter of time. But companies can opt out of their content showing up in Google's AI results if they want. But I think most companies won't want to do that. And we are expecting that at least half of our organic traffic will drop, right? And that seems to be the industry consensus. So there's definitely drop in visibility. There's reduced need to click through, right? And then the click-through rates are also going to decrease. And so as a result, you're going to have less revenue from coming in from organic leads, if you will. So what I would say is we need to prioritize our content such that it captures and conveys, value rather quickly, right? So you still want to have a lot of details, but in the beginning, do that summary, right? So that limited space and time, you want to make the most out of that, because the users will decide very quickly to click through or to remain on Google's search engine results page. And so the way we're doing things is we're going to mitigate. We're going to mitigate our strategies with content. First of all, we're focusing more on conversion rate optimization. So we want to maximize the effectiveness of the traffic that comes to us and make sure that more of them are staying engaged and are clicking through. We're also looking at diversifying our traffic source, right? So yes, Google is the largest, but we're also spending more time and effort on Bing, right? It has less traffic, but it does diversify our risk. We're also investing in our basics, right? Good content is good content. At the end of the day, if you're writing content, heavens forbid, using just a conversational AI or a generative AI, that's a no-no. It has its place, it can help, but it should not write the content for you. We still believe that our visitors want to learn something. Once you add value to them by teaching them something new, you then have earned the right to sell something to them, if you will. So we're continuing to make sure that our content is good and it's focused on our ICP and our buyer persona. So it's not broad, it's not trying to be everything for everyone, but be much more focused. We're also looking at core vitals, right? The importance of that has not gone away. website, just all the core things of making sure pages load up fast. You've got alt tags, meta tags, all meta information, all of that, right? That hasn't gone away. And then we're also looking at multiple marketing channels, right? So it's not like search is everything. It's not. So we're integrating social media, email marketing, paid search to create a more resilient marketing mix, if you will. Those are some of the ways that we're mitigating that. But at the end of the day, good content will always be there and there'll always be something that will be rewarded. It's just that you can't put your blinders on and say, well, I'm just going to double down to the exclusion of other strategies.
I love that perspective. I think good content will be rewarded, but we also have to get it in front of people who might benefit from it. And with Blue Shift, there's a bit of an educational project here, right? I mean, we have to get people to understand the problem if they don't already. If they don't already have problem awareness, we probably need to help them get to that. But maybe it's the solution awareness here that's a bigger part of the exercise, because I imagine the largest marketers understand that they're not consistently communicating across channels and that they have blind spots, right, with where their consumers might be. So is that affecting your content strategy? The idea that the solution awareness might be the challenge in part?
For sure. Yeah. But, we target larger companies. So we've never been heavily focused on just organic search and paid ads. Our customers go to trade shows, for example. That's where they learn about things, or analyst relations. They talk to analysts, help me find my shortlist and things like that. So we're also aware that there are lots of other channels. The goal is to understand your buyer personas really well and figure out where do they go to discover information and make sure that you go there, whether it's an association or a trade show or an event or whatever, analysts. You want to be all things to them in just the channels that matter, not all channels, right? Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. And so I do find, right? So this is probably the other thing I should have mentioned earlier is when I come into a company, lots of companies will say, oh, this is our ICP and it's this and this. And I said, great, let's put it down on paper. And you'd be surprised. I mean, that's where the magic happens. Once you put it down on paper, you'll find out, oh, people are saying one thing, but they really meant this. So the sooner we can get very focused on the ICP and the components. Is it the geography? Is it the size? Is it the number of people? Is it the revenue? Is it certain behavioral characteristics? Then we have focus. Then we can just be all things to just that group. The next part of it is having the discipline to identify all the companies that match that criteria and then only market to them. But a lot of times what I find is people just generally have an idea, but until you put it down on paper, that's where the understanding happens. Because sales will have a different idea, marketing have a different idea, maybe the exec staff has a different idea. So I do feel like it's important to do that and then do the things that's important to them. So if you find out that all they do is only do search and maybe ads, then at least, hey, some of these other channels, maybe we don't spend as much. We can't ignore it, but we focus our efforts there. And then you start building out this machine of all types of content. Top of funnel, mid, late, thought leadership content, your own original research, that will always do well. As well as you do speaking events and you build out educational content, the kind that Google and Bing and the other search engines will reward. So I do think that helps to focus on what things that we can't do everything.
I think it's a really good point too in the enterprise sale. A lot of times we think of these things as all being white collar operators of the software. And a fair number of our clients are actually in software that speaks both to the C-suite and an operational component of a business, whether it's manufacturing or construction. And some of those people aren't where you'd expect to find others of your buying committees. For example, a lot of people in the field in construction don't find themselves on LinkedIn. So if you're trying to get the operational, like the hands-on operators of these softwares, and you're not reaching them where they are, it could be very difficult to get the whole buying committee to receive your message. Where maybe if you were sponsoring the food trucks in 50 DMAs or 20 DMAs, that might be a great way to get your message in the hands of people that are actually out in the field. It was just one example. So thinking a little creatively and holistically about where your buying committee is, especially on these enterprise purchases, I think it's a really important part of success.
Yeah, so along that, marketers, when they first start, don't just talk to sales, don't just talk to the marketing people, the exec staff and customer success. Talk to customers if you can, right? Validate. Where did you find us? What were you thinking when you first had the idea to look for a solution like ours? Because that helps you to figure out, oh, it's only the food trucks, as you said, or wherever that is. And then be there because you have enough consensus and understanding that this is how my customers go for information. This is how they find solutions like ours.
Absolutely. I want to keep digging on this ICP thing. This is a really important conversation we keep having. And bring up construction. We have a client in construction software, and it turns out there's like 1,300 companies that can buy from them. That really is their ICPs, the people that are involved in large scale construction projects that use software to enable prefabrication. So it's a narrow thing, but they're big companies. When we ratchet down the ICP like that, all of a sudden our numbers change. Like the number of new people we engage with goes down dramatically, but they're all much more targeted. So I think when we maybe going hand in hand with that refinement of the ICP as we're new in a role or addressing a new market, we set the expectations. What's the velocity going to be of pipeline generation, conversations that we're going to stimulate, especially if we haven't had a very good picture of ICP before. When we narrow it down, I think we just have to set expectations with our peers in the C-suite that the volumes could be different, but the quality, fidelity will be a lot better, right?
Before you get to ICP, there's always the TAM and the SAM that you would do to figure out what is the total potential. Of that, a subset will buy from us. They'll buy from competitors. And then of that, not everybody will be in the buying cycle. But if you have that fidelity, that's awesome because then you are not wasting your time and effort in areas that this ICP doesn't value. And you can also do much more targeted, much more personalized approach, right? Than if you had thousands and thousands. So like consumers, people want to be met on their terms. They want to know that you understand their needs, you're engaging with them at the right time, maybe on the right device, with the information that they find helpful. I actually like that. I mean, I would love to have just 1,300 to target because then I know I can create these ABM programs where I can be all things to them and I can do a much more personalized approach than having to go after a larger chunk where I think we spend a lot more time and effort there. So I would love to have 1,300 to focus on. And I know depending on how long the contracts are in that industry, a good quarter of them are probably in the buying cycle. It makes it a lot easier to be targeted. You can go to just those specific shows or, do small group events where they're there or even meet with them, with a partner or whatever, right? So I love that.
A lot of in-person possibilities there. And we brought it up twice. So I think if people listening to the episode haven't revisited the idea of in-person events, whether it's industry events or your own roadshow, something, your own community, you have to find a way to get in front of people in person now because that is roaring back.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And it's not that difficult to rent out a corner of a restaurant, host them around some interesting topic, right? People have to eat lunch. People have to eat breakfast, right? Find out what works and then hit the road. They're so much more fun and much more rewarding because you can have those intimate conversations. They can ask their questions and they'll get answers.
I love the idea of breakfast. It could be the bacon, egg, and cheese tour, right? So there you go. We coined it here, the bacon, egg, and cheese tour. Let's talk a little bit about this ICP, a little bit more about it. So in our prep session, you talked about thinking about expanding or extending your ICP. What are the gates that you think you need to move through as a marketing leader to guide an organization to expand its ICP? Because I think a lot of companies, if they've been at it a while, 5, 10 years, they feel like maybe they've exhausted the opportunity and they need to go further. I don't always know if it's the right thing. Sometimes I feel like other tactics or strategies might make sense, but when is it right to extend your ICP and how do you know that?
It's going to be different for every company. What I know from at least my past experience is if you have the lion's share of the market, you probably have gotten to a point where you can certainly continue to expand, but you're getting to a point where maybe like we've saturated ourselves. Maybe the sales cycles are slowing down. So you're going to start to see that now you've hit the first set of people that have a need that bought. Now to get the next chunk, which maybe needs some persuading, it slows down the sales cycle. So you'll start to get signals, small bits from lots of different places that tells you that, okay, maybe we've gone to that point where we need to expand. Or maybe you had your fair share of the market, right? It's a crowded space and it's reasonable that you're not going to get the lion's share, but you've gotten enough. is your product ready, right? Like then you need to ask, can my product expand to other verticals or to other sizes? And that doesn't happen overnight. So as you start to get those signals, you need to start planning that. Is it going up market or down market? Is it going to a different industry? Like Blueshift's products are horizontal, so it's easy for us to go to different verticals, but not all products are set up that way. So you'll want to start to think about the roadmap and how you can accommodate that. You'll also want to think about your whole go-to-market approach, right? Because maybe the folks in a different industry buy differently. Maybe you need expertise from sales that have the domain knowledge, or if you're going up market, maybe you are doing more of the high volume leads. And now you need to start to think about a more personalized small group or one-to-one approach. So our go-to-market process and our ICP criteria is reviewed. When you do the first analysis, you're exhausted. You're like, okay, that took forever. I'm not going to look at it for a while. But then you get to a point where like after a year, you want to review it quarterly. You want to see, are we still being successful? Are our conversion rates just as high? Our sales cycle, if they're extending unnecessarily, that's when you start to get an idea, hey, I need to look, I need to expand. You do some market research, you come back with feedback, you talk to product, right? Then you start to get ready, but you have to do it proactively. Like the worst thing is you come to that realization, then you realize, oh, in order to expand, we have all this work to do and it will take us another year, right? Hopefully no one gets to that point where they're going to have to struggle, if you will, for a year or so. So be proactive, like put in a process, easier said than done. But if you can think about it ahead of time, it's better to get ahead of it.
This is an interesting dynamic where I think sometimes like a founder at a scale up or earlier stage, not when they're very mature, but the founder will come into marketing or sales and say, I really want to sell to this whole new group of people. And then they walk out the door, right? So they lob this bomb in your office and then they expect magic in a quarter. And I think it requires, especially in those situations, a great deal of nuance to be able to coach a CEO that this could be a 9-month or 12-month path to this motion, not a 2-month thing where we're going to go run after it. Or it might be like even research to see if that initiative will work out. Like, what is the competitive landscape? How much velocity is there in that market? Seems like the ICP expansion is like very high risk reward. It could be amazingly rewarding, or it could be a real bummer. You know, I'm always thinking about CMO career, CMO longevity as part of like what we try and help our clients accomplish. It's not just grow the business, it's also manage their own careers effectively. So this one to me seems like fraught with risk and gigantic opportunity at the same time.
It can be tough, you're right. So, a couple of things. One is I would say the CEO comes in and says, hey, we should expand there. I would write that down on paper. Again, this does not have to be like days and days. It can be in half an hour, if you will. But I'd write down, what are the characteristics of that new market that he or she believes we should expand to and why? So I would try to, again, get it down on paper, because what people say and the words they use are sometimes interpreted differently, or they mean something else, they use different words. So I would get it down on paper and then say, okay, let's just say the answer is it's going to take us a while to get there. What I would have as a way to meet both sides is, let's run a pilot. Let's go after a small set of accounts that we think would be ideal in this new industry or this new size. Run that, and in parallel, let's go do the research. Let's do the preparation and the homework to figure out what is it going to take us to succeed. If you get really fast traction and oh my God, they're buying, then you're like, well, maybe we don't need to go change the product too much. But if you start to get lukewarm responses, then at least that arms you to say, hey, you know what? Still a good idea, but here's some of the things we have to do to get traction. So the test and trial, it's like when a CMO comes into a company, run a lot of small tests. Even if you think it works and you've done it 12 times and it's been successful, the company is different that you've just landed in. The customers are different. Don't assume it'll work, but do those small tests, learn from it, and then go and scale. Like that's part of my DNA, which is like, let's run these small experiments, discard what doesn't work, what works, double down on it, because now you've got a formula that can start to scale and repeat.
I love that. We had the founder of a sales enablement tool called Lemlist on, I guess about 1.5 or 2 years ago. And before he even had a product, he was throwing up landing pages and seeing what people bought off on. If they clicked submit, on a landing page with these 5 feature bullets more than the other 5 feature bullets. That's what he went to build.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with that. And maybe that kind of mindset will take the pressure off that scenario for the marketing leader. It's a yes and, right?
Yeah.
It's a yes, that's a great idea. We're going to test it. And by the way, we're going to also figure out what it's going to take to really get there. We give a little sugar while we do the hard work to figure out if there's really a market there. I think there's that pearl of wisdom we're looking for in SaaS Backwards. Every episode, I'm looking for that one thing that might help someone out. I think maybe that's going to be one of them here. I think it's a good segue maybe to go right into product just for a moment, like a level down. You talked about the importance of product marketing when you met with us before. And I feel this is misunderstood. And we haven't really talked a lot about it on the podcast. So can you define from your point of view, product marketing, where you are, where you sit, your experience? And then let's talk about why that's important to scaling up a company.
Sure. Yeah. So I used to be a product marketer. A couple of times I led that function at a company. So it's something that I'm passionate about. But the product marketing function, usually it's a reflection of the role of product in a company and the complexity of go-to-market, right? So sometimes like earlier stage product marketers, usually it's a combined role. But actually, before we get into that, so product marketing. The product marketing function is to champion the voice of the customer, identify new opportunities for market and expansion. It's also to create compelling positioning and messaging. And then it's to drive adoption of those products. As a result of product marketers sitting between marketing, the rest of marketing, and product management, they usually drive alignment across the company that way and marrying those together. So that's what successful product marketers do. Now, depending on the stage of a company, the product marketing function itself is very different. And this is where companies have to recognize where they are such that they know they've hired for the right skills. And product marketers themselves, experienced ones, will have skills across all early stage, growing, as well as mature organizations. But companies need different things. So at earlier stage, they're going to need content creation. Customer acquisition is a priority, so they're going to work on that. They're going to help out with the dents, like here's the messaging positioning at a trade show. They're going to work on the go-to-market strategy. As the company starts to grow, and it's no longer early stage, it's more mature, analyst relations, buyer personas, competitor intelligence, customer marketing starts to become important, packaging and pricing, right? So you can start to see that and helping with the product roadmap through their research. And still, revenue growth is important. As you become more mature, all of the things I described are part of that role. But in addition, at more mature companies, product marketers care about increasing customer usage. They'll put in many more metrics. Partner marketing starts to become important. Product profitability becomes important. More sales tools, right? Enablement happens in the earlier stages, but now you're adding sales tools, win-loss reporting, much more of the functions that are now repeatable, and now you're starting to optimize. You're measuring and optimize. So the role does vary. And I think one of the toughest things about product marketing is unless you have a realistic understanding of what you need your product marketer to do, it can be frustrating for the product marketer because they're like, well, I'm only doing, if they're in early stage content creation, but there's so much more I can do, right? So that mismatch can happen. And so founders need to also understand where they are and what to expect from the product marketing function.
A lot of these young companies, the founders doing some of this work, right?
Yes.
So they're helping define the product. They're working on pricing, the proposition for the customer. Many of the founders I've interviewed have done dozens or hundreds of interviews before even building a product. So they feel a lot of ownership of this function. And it's probably hard for them to give it up or to give much of it up. Have you ever experienced that yourself?
Yeah, I mean, founders I've worked with, some are sales oriented, some are product oriented, and some are marketing oriented, depends. So you're right. It's their baby. They had this great success. That's why the company is starting to hire. And so it can be tough to let go. But there's so much that a product marketer can do that if the founders only focus on that, he or she is not scaling themselves for the benefit of the company. So if you get to a point where it's not sustainable, that's where you hire a product marketer. It's got to be a gradual transition, if you will, right? The product marketer has to show and earn their stripes, like, here's where I can add value. Here's so much more that we can do for the founder to start to kind of let go, if you will. Gosh, there's no easy way to do that.
I feel like pricing and packaging are two places that are likely wins for a new product marketer. I can't tell you how many SaaS companies we've worked with, like almost all of them have had opportunities in pricing or packaging or both. In a new role, especially, if the founders had the helm of all of product for a while, they might have lost sight of where pricing is going in the market. And it's a big opportunity for one of those early wins, reorganize pricing and show like sometimes significant change to profitability just with that one lever. Janet, this was a great episode. We did so many things. It was like a whirlwind tour of SaaS marketing. I want to thank you so much. If people want to connect with you or learn more about Blue Shift, how can they do that?
They can connect with me on LinkedIn. My name is unique. I don't think there's another Janet Jaiswal, so really easy to find me. But yeah, love to have conversations that share my knowledge. As I mentioned earlier, I advise companies all the time. I'm happy to help anybody that asks for help. So yeah, just reach out.
That's awesome. And I'm on LinkedIn as well, LinkedIn/in/Ken Lempit. My demand generation agency for SaaS is Austin Lawrence Group. We're at austinlawrence.com. And if you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, please subscribe to SaaS Backwards, wherever you get your podcasts. And Janet Jaiswal, thank you for being such a great guest here today.
You're welcome. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to the SaaS Backwards podcast, brought to you by Austin Lawrence Group. We're a growth marketing agency that helps SaaS firms reduce churn, accelerate sales, and generate demand. Learn more about us at www.austinlawrence.com. You can email Ken Lempit at kl@austinlawrence.com about any SaaS marketing or customer retention subject. We hope you'll subscribe, and thanks again for listening.